From SiriusXM's Doctor Radio, this is Coronavirus, everything you need to know now.
From the Child Psychology Show, Dr. Lori Evans and Dr. Jess Shatkin.
I've had lots of sessions this week, virtual sessions, where I'll start out with the kid and the parent gets on with me and says, okay, I don't know how to work and be the homeschool teacher for my kid at the same time, because what we have is these elementary school kids at home who are not yet independent learners. So talk to us a little bit about this way of going to school for kids being totally different, and now it being online and not in a classroom. So start from the beginning. What are you getting calls about? What are people asking, and how can we help?
Yeah, I mean, everything you just said could not be more true. I think that first, their parents, grandparents, caregivers, there's so much anxiety around both, everything, obviously, but for this, thinking about how this suddenly begins. There wasn't even preparation for thinking about, well, I might have to homeschool my kids. And as you said, there's still all the dimensions of our work lives and other things that need to be running and going. And we have our children who are used to being in a very different kind of a structure. So for that reason and all of the reasons, the very first thing that I would like to really share with our listeners and our community is that to take time to create the at-home learning environment. Don't be in a rush to, I know we'll talk about this in the hour we have about schedules, and I do have some things I can share about that. But the very first and most important thing is let's create at home a sense of calm and well-being around learning, because that's a different experience. Your child is used to putting his or her backpack on and going to the bus or subway or walking to school and being in a different place for that kind of environment. So how we can do this at home is no matter what size place you live in, apartment, house, shared with other relatives, to create a space that feels like a learning space is number one. Mm-hmm. Is it the kitchen table? Is it the living room couch? Is it wherever it is that there is a space that feels sacred and feels secure? Because even in school, your children they have little boxes to keep their things in. Teachers really do understand that kids need their personal learning spaces. And so at home, we have to actually take the time to do the same thing. So for me, that's step one, is where is that learning?
And before you go further, I want to jump in and just talk about that a little bit more, because that is so huge for me. When I was in ninth grade, and I wrote about this in one of my 2 books compared to your 8, but I wrote about how I was failing in school, and I was playing football and playing guitar, and I was doing all of these things that were not school. I just entered high school, and my teachers were tough, and my dad and mom, but my dad really ran this train. He basically, pulled me out of football 2 weeks before the end of the season, which was tremendously humiliating, and he made me quit the band. And basically he said, we're building a study, and here's what's going to happen is every night when I'm home from work and after dinner, I'm going to go to that study, and you're going to go there and do your homework too. And we had this whole sort of organization, and having a study. It happened that my brother had moved out of the home by then, my older brother. So we had an extra room, put 2 desks in there. And of course I went kicking and screaming for months and months, but about 2 or 3 months in, as I really started to learn and enjoy learning, I loved that study. It was a boring white box room with a desk of my own and a chair of my own. We went to Bus Vans Furniture, I think is what they were called, in San Francisco, and got an old wooden chair for $30, an old library chair that had been in some public library, which I still have. It's in my daughter's room now at her desk. And then we built both of our kids a desk as they became maybe around junior high. Small desks, small city, big city, small apartments, but small desk and a place where they can work. And then we also made the dining room table a free zone for work. So about half of that dining room table for years had school supplies on it and things, and we just moved it over for dinner, and we let it happen again so people could be in the same common space. But I just want to emphasize how amazing it is to have your own space for that, a little bit of study space.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Pam, what I've noticed from my colleagues who are posting on Facebook kind of what they're doing as they're trying to work, it is sometimes taking over a space that has to be kind of collapsed at the end of the school day. But so number one, we're going to try and create this space. And then you talk about, I think, a schedule or a routine. So tell us a little bit about that, because it's a little bit harder. Certainly for the younger kids, I see that teenagers keep telling me, okay, I'm staying up later, I'm waking up later, and when they say later, they mean much later on both ends. But so what do you think about how do we do the schedule?
Right. So, the schedule, the routines are so important. Even before we began to talk about homeschooling, we think about the routines of the child's life. I'm always advocating for read-alouds at home and times to sit beside your child while reading, when they're reading independently and you are too. Those routines can and should continue, but now we're faced with a much bigger challenge, which is the entire otherwise known as the school day that's happening in the home. And so when we think about routines at the very beginning of all this, and when school districts started to close, I received many different examples from friends and relatives and colleagues of homeschool schedules that people were sharing with me to say, hey, what do you think of this? I'm going to do, we're going to start the morning with a discussion, and then we're going to do science, and we're going to do math, and we're going to do social studies. And all of those things are good, and schedules are really good. They're really good for children, and if we can post them in a big way, get a big piece of even just the back of newsprint, or just hang it somewhere where the children can see on the refrigerator, all good. But I also want to say that the schedule shouldn't be all academic. It should be lots of other things that can be actually put into the schedule that feel everything from all the time that you might have otherwise been spent sitting at your desk to saying, let's have that be our take a walk time, or let's have that be our, and call it a nature walk instead of just, I've got to get out from under my work. Use this opportunity to actually make your own schedule for work at home feel more meaningful and healthy, because it's easy for us to say, we've got to sit all day and get our work done. We're stressed by that too, to make the schedule work for all of you, for the whole family. The other thing about the schedule is that in school, for teachers, for me as an educator, things I'm building into the schedule are things like the read aloud, things like snack time, things like free play and choice time, and the arts and crafts that we do in our classrooms, or making a fort out of some idea that we have in pre-K or grades 1, 2, and 3, or even beyond. And so making the schedule a little more fanciful and enchanted and magical and playful. And the best people to ask about that are actually the kids themselves, your children. Instead of making a schedule at night when everyone's gone to bed and you and your partner, or you by yourself, are sitting there trying to suddenly become a teacher, is instead to say you can co-create a schedule with your children. And if they say, you know what, I don't like to read, I don't want that in the schedule at all, then let's rename that. Let's call that playtime too, and try to be a little more playful about the books that you're reading. But the schedule, co-create the schedule, make it feel more playful no matter what the age of your children are. So, for example, if you have a 9th grader, yes, I know they have to do their AP classes, and yes, I know everyone's anxious about a lot of things that will happen when we get back into the time that the kids will go back to school. But they also need that time. They desperately need the time in the schedule to have a creative outlet, and have that 9th grader schedule be a little bit more about the arts, or those are just normal human things.
Pam, what I'm hearing is, often when I observe in schools, there are things I learn from teachers, that are really the essential part too, that we make a schedule, but especially in times like these, we may have to have that schedule that's like on a whiteboard so we can erase it or change it, or on Velcro so that we can be flexible. Because if parents are trying to also do their work, they may unexpectedly need to take a work call. So I love the parents who can say, okay, we're going to have free time now. We're going to, move that around. So there needs to be, I think, that idea of flexibility. And the other thing that strikes me, and what I've seen really wonderfully, is so many times we wish that schools could be more hands-on learning from start to finish, but it's hard to do when there are 30 kids in there. But you can teach chemistry via cooking, and you can teach, science with plants and things like that. So I want to just make sure that parents know that it doesn't have to be all just worksheets and,
right,
and boring. And the idea is that even if you are reading a recipe, even if you are reading the newspaper, these are fine reading things. Books are great, and reading is reading. What do you think about that one?
Oh, I could not agree with you more. And I want to just amplify what you said about everything from cooking to making things to creating things, that you're being at home actually provides the child who's used to being at home and actually loves being at home and has certain feelings about that feel a little more natural than school in some ways. It gives us the opportunity to actually teach in that integrated way and across different content areas, like you're saying. And then also, let's say you are doing your work and you have a phone deadline. What a great way to say to your child, we're going to need a snack time. Could you help me to prepare a plate for that?
Right.
And for a third grader to be learning those kinds of independent functioning skills, and also those social emotional skills of I'm helping my mom. She's on the work call. I'm going to bring her, a cup of water, or those are actual learning moments that don't be worried. Don't be worried that you missed the moment to teach them a math problem. You're actually teaching them how to be human and be in the world at this time and to be together.